Story, we'll come back to that because it sounds like something to do.
I hope you do.
I'll defer to Senator Markwayne Mullin.
Well, thank you. And considering the chairman doesn't want to hear any of that information because I believe he's pretty biased in his opinion already, Mr. Schultz, I'll give you an opportunity to finish that if you'll do it quickly.
Thank you very much. So, as you might imagine, we're very curious to understand what happened in Buffalo. And we later found out that this individual, which was hired in 2020, was paid for and under the employment of the union that was basically trying to organize Starbucks. We later found out there was more than one person. And so you might want to ask yourself, where's the fairness, right, the objectivity, and the integrity of what we're talking about here today?
No, and I mean, if you're anti-union as a CEO, you're anti-union busting, or you're for union busting. I'm not saying you're anti-union. I'm just saying that it seems like to me, as a former CEO, not nearly at the success that you were at, sir, and I'm not trying to defend your company because, quite frankly, politically, we're on totally different ends of the spectrum. And so the irony of this hearing is actually kind of funny. And I do want to point out some hypocrisy about this hearing with the chairman. And it's not trying to get personal. All this information is going to be very public. But the fact that you can't defend your company because you want to have a good relationship with your employees and you believe in employee value, which we all do. Any CEO knows that the success of our companies are based on our employees. We get that. But it seems like unions today, all they want to do is fight with their employees or their employer, the same employer that is hiring those team members, and that friction causes a very volatile and tough workplace. And if the company and the employees aren't in the same boat, rowing in the same direction, then neither one can be successful. And unions themselves, if you're part of a union, you can never be an executive, you can never be a manager, and never be a CEO. And if you can't be an executive or a manager or the CEO, then how are you actually going to implement the changes that the unions want in those positions to begin with? And it seems like they actually hold back their team members. Mm-hmm. But I take offense to the chairman pointing out that all CEOs are corrupt because they're millionaires. You know, if you make a lot of money, you're corrupt. It's bothering to me because, Mr. Chairman, you yourself have been very successful. Rightfully so. Glad you have been. You've been in office for 28 years, and you and your wife have immersed a wealth of over $8 million. And in fact, your quote on being wealthy and being a millionaire was, well, if you write a bestseller, you can be a millionaire too. If you can be a millionaire, why can't Mr. Schultz and other CEOs be millionaires and be honest too? If that's the case, then why is it that Mr. Schultz, who actually creates jobs and a bestseller of a book, isn't creating any jobs? Why is it that he's corrupt and you're not? Why is it that all CEOs are corrupt because they're wealthy, and yet our chairman, who is wealthy, and I'm glad you are, you're not? Guys, the government's role is to create an environment for entrepreneurs, for go-getters, for world changers, to be successful in life. The U.S. government is designed for people that want to succeed can. We can go out and achieve anything that we choose to. But when you lean towards socialism, what you think is government is the answer and unions are the choice. And if you're against us, then you're dead wrong and you must be corrupt. That's not the world we're living in. That's not the America that we believe in. And I'm not against unions. If you want to choose to be in a union, be in a union. But if you choose not to, then you choose not to. And that's why I'm good with right-to-work states. That's honestly why unions actually thrive in Oklahoma, and we're right-to-work states, because it creates a happy environment and a good environment, because employees get to choose what they want to be part of. And the employer can have a say in it. What is wrong with choice? What is wrong with employees having a choice? What is wrong with the CEO defending his company and openly saying that he is providing good benefits and paying higher than everybody else? But yet, if you're not part of a union, you're also paying starvation wages. What hypocrisy! What bias! Chairman, You are chair of the Health, Education, Labor, and Pension Committee. We shouldn't have a biased approach. We should have what's best for America and all those that want to thrive and work in it. And so while we politically disagree, Mr. Schultz, I applaud you for your success. And I applaud all the CEOs out there for their success and all the employees that work hard, that's in the same boat, that's making their companies great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, let me respond. The senator did mention my name, I think. And I think you got an all-time record here. You've made more misstatements in a shorter period of time than I have ever heard.
Please correct
Well,
me,
if I'm
because
worth
it's
$8
all
million,
public.
excuse me.
It's all public.
Excuse me.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right? Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
If I'm worth $8 million, that's good news to me. I'm not aware of it. That's a lie. All right? Number two.
Part of public records.
You're probably looking at some phony right-wing internet stuff. It ain't true.
No,
All right? You should read beyond that. It is not true.
it's
All
part
right?
of public records.
No, it is not public record.
Okay. Well, you made
It is not
$1.7 million on your book.
public record.
You made
All right? It is-
$1.7 on your book.
Excuse me. I've got the mic now. Number
you not
two,
make the statement
I
that if
have
you want to
the
be a
mic
millionaire?
now. I've got it.
Did you
had
not
your
make
time.
that statement?
You had your time.
Okay.
All right? You're not telling the truth. Second of all, you got no evidence that I have ever said that all CEOs are corrupt. I have never, ever said that.
Probably not all, but every time you talk
probably
about
not, then
CEOs,
you
you do
shouldn't
say that.
say it. Furthermore, what this hearing is about is whether or not you talk about being pro-union. Really, what this hearing is about is whether workers have the constitutional right to form a union. The evidence is overwhelming, not from me, but from the National Labor Relations Board, is that time after time after time, despite what Mr. Schultz is saying, Starbucks has broken the law and has prevented workers from joining unions to collectively bargain for decent wages and benefits. Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Schultz, I want to begin.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
How many guns has the ATF lost?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Is it a difficult question to understand?
Well, I don't know if you're referring to any particular incident or time
How many
period.
instances should we be looking at where you've lost guns?
So if what you're referring to is what happened at the National Destruction Branch, no guns were lost. They were stolen by an individual who's now in prison,
Right.
who was
right.
not an
But-
ATF employee.
But there were recommendations made on what you should do so that you don't become the victim of the theft, and the Inspector General saying you're not following them. I'm quoting directly from the Inspector General's report. Thousands of firearms parts, and ammunition had been stolen from the ATF. So you gave testimony that the brave ATF agents are the ones showing up at 2 in the morning after a burglary, but it seems as though in this case, you were the one burglarized. Why have you not followed the recommendations of the Office of Inspector General so that you aren't the mark?
Again, I want to say that it is brave women men and women of ATF who do this. That's not a
Well, I know what they're doing. I know what they're doing.
Every
They're
day.
getting robbed on one hand, so you can't keep a hold of the guns you're supposed to have. But then you do keep a hold of a bunch of stuff you're not supposed to have a hold of. The GAO report, firearms data, ATF did not always comply with the Appropriations Act restriction and should better adhere to its policies. As a result of breaking the law, didn't you guys have to go and delete like 250,000 records that you illegally kept?
Again, with respect to both the Inspector General reports that you're talking
Nope,
about.
one's Inspector General, one's GAO.
Well,
Very
the Inspector General report, ATF, that happened several years ago, more than that.
2022
And
is the
ATF has,
date of
the
the
report
report.
came out, but the theft, and
Yeah.
ATF has implemented numerous different safety measures with respect to the National Destructive Branch.
Well, I mean,
in order
I'm reading to you
safeguard-
from the report from last year, Mr. Director. We found that the NDB staff does not currently in 2022, adhere to established operating procedures in place to mitigate risk of firearms being lost and stolen. So I guess that shows an ATF that is not functioning correctly and is not responding to the problems you create. You keep records you're not supposed to. It was 250,000 of them you had to delete, right?
I don't believe that is.
Was it over 200,000 that you had to delete?
So what was happening was.
I just want to know the number of records you had to delete that were not being lawfully maintained.
There were records that had not actually been searched, but my understanding
Hundreds of
is
thousands
were
of them.
searchable.
And so that's what you guys do. You keep what you shouldn't keep. You lose what you're not supposed to lose. But how do you treat regular Americans? I got this letter from someone in my district, a firearms dealer. I have been a firearms dealer for 46 years. For 46 years, I've had a good relationship with law enforcement. Then came the ATF's zero tolerance policy. 2 years ago, while in the process of selling a firearm to a customer, I completed their background check using Florida's FDLE firearm purchasing program. The background check was uneventful, and FDLE rendered an approval number. Some months later, during an ATF audit, I was told the background check was now a non-approval. Even though FDLE made the error, it was on my paperwork, so ATF deemed it a willful error. After completing close to 50,000 background checks over 46 years, why would I willfully ignore this background check? The answer is simple. I did not, but the ATF has revoked my license, ended my career, and my livelihood. So I guess the question is, why should you be able to destroy the life of one of my constituents over a technicality where they weren't even at fault, when you all lose thousands of guns and illegally keep hundreds of thousands of records?
Respectfully, Congress has given us the authority to inspect and make sure that firearms dealers, the vast majority by the which are compliant, they are our first line of defense in dealing with straw purchases.
This guy isn't your first line of defense anymore. He's fired.
But a very small minority, those dealers, after due process, have been determined. A small minority, ATF, enforcer of gun laws, lost thousands of firearm parts to thieves. New data shows ATF gun store restrictions at the highest rate in 16 years. Mr. Director, the definition of hypocrisy is when you can't live up to your own standard. So you have imposed a zero tolerance policy that is resulting in the highest rate of revocations in 16 years, and you wouldn't be able to meet your own zero tolerance policy because you lose stuff you're supposed to keep, and then you keep stuff that it's illegal to keep. And by the way, I am one of those MAGA Republicans that would defund your salary, your agency, and I think all these good things that you say exist could happen with those folks at the local and state level, and this is a terrible abuse of power.
This can respond.
I'm not sure there was a question at the end.
Okay. I know, I'm just giving you
I
opportunity
was
to
gonna,
respond.
I didn't get there.
Yeah. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Biggs. You've given us testimony today that you're disappointed that the FBI didn't cooperate more, right? That was your testimony.
Said that.
Yeah, so we're disappointed too, but the difference is when regular folks do things that are wrong and unlawful, there's typically greater effort to try to get those people before a grand jury to utilize criminal process where appropriate, not for other purposes. And it's just like, oh, well, Bill Priestep, the guy who might have set this whole op in motion, he just didn't want to talk to you about certain things, and you were real accommodating to that. And then Mifsud, the person who juices Papadopoulos to create this predicate that you find improper. You guys, I mean, did you ever know who his lawyer was, Mifsud's lawyer?
Talked to his lawyer in Europe. I don't know if
So
he
wait, you could
represented
find the guy's
United
lawyer,
States.
but you couldn't find him?
We contacted somebody that we knew had represented him in a part of the effort to try to locate him.
And you got the lawyer. And then now you're sitting here in front of the judiciary saying you could find the guy's lawyer, but you couldn't effectuate the service of a subpoena because you couldn't find him?
Well,
do you know how
first of all,
silly that sounds?
as you may or may not know, we wouldn't have the authority to serve a subpoena overseas. The lawyer didn't know where Mifsud was. He was in communication with him, but he claimed not to know where he was. And we were trying to arrange an opportunity to talk to Mifsud.
Did you take possession of 2 BlackBerry phones from Mifsud in any way?
There were phones that were provided to us by
So you could find the
Mifsud's
phones, but
lawyer.
not the guy.
Correct?
Do you see how silly this looks? Like you found the lawyer, you found the phones, but the actual dude who got ordered by Western intelligence to go start this thing you couldn't find? It's kind of laughable. It seems like more than disappointment. It seems like you weren't really trying to expose the true core of the corruption, that you were trying to go at it another way.
Yeah. As we said in the report, and as I said in my opening remarks, we pursued the facts as best we could.
Well, how about this
tools
fact?
that we have?
Okay, how about this fact, Mr. Durham? The entire Mueller team does a hard reset on their Apple phone in synchronization to wipe away evidence. Did you investigate that?
I've read that.
Well, why did you investigate it? Who gave the order on the Mueller team to wipe the phones?
Yeah, that was not something that we were asked to look at, and we didn't.
No,
look
that's
at that.
not true, Mr. Durham. That is not true, because I'm holding the document that authorizes your activity, and it specifically says the investigation of Special Counsel Robert Mueller. It's in Mr. Chairman, I seek unanimous consent to enter into the record the order that says that you're supposed to investigate these things. And so, like, whether it's the Mueller team, MIFSUD, how about Azra Turk? Azra Turk, what's Azra Turk's real name? Do you know that?
I'm not going to be disclosing the names of FBI personnel that are otherwise unavailable.
But an FBI, so the FBI sends somebody to go honeypot George Papadopoulos. Who gave the order to do that?
I think that's beyond the scope of what's in the report.
It's literally the scope of what your charging order is. Who put it in motion? We get after it was put in motion, the FBI did a bunch of wrong and corrupt things. Totally understand. We're trying to deal with that. But when you are part of the cover-up, Mr. Durham, then it makes our job harder.
Yeah, well, if that's your thought, I mean, there's no way of dissuading you from that. I can tell you that it's offensive and that the people who worked on this investigation have spent their lives trying to protect the people in this country and pursue within the law what it is that we are authorized to do.
You tried 2 cases, lost both of them, and then the one guilty plea you got, Kleinsmith is back to practicing law in Washington, D.C. today.
Yeah, that's beyond my control.
Right, but the fact that you allowed that plea to occur, right, and then the punishment was insufficient, the fact that you didn't charge Andrew McCabe, you didn't convict the lying Democrats or the lying Russians, you didn't investigate MIFSUD or the Mueller probe, even though, as we sit here today in black letter, that was your charge. Have you ever heard of the Washington Generals?
The Washington Generals, yes.
Yeah, and they're the team that basically gets paid to show up and lose, right?
Well, I'm sure that the players who exert blood, sweat, and tears don't view it that way, but you might.
I think they do. I think they do, because the job of the Washington Generals is to show up every night and to play the Harlem Globetrotters. And their job is to lose.
I'm sorry, I was thinking of a different thing.
Yeah, so their job is to lose. And I'm kind of wondering, and it just seems so facially obvious that it's not what's in your report that's telling, it's the omission, it's the lack of work you did. And for the people like the chairman who put trust in you, I think you let them down, I think you let the country down, and you are one of the barriers to the true accountability that we need.
Do I get to respond to that or comment on that? Yeah. Well, I don't know if you've ever investigated a crime.
I don't know that you have. You didn't investigate these, Mr. Durham.
Whether or
How about
not,
Andy McCabe? Did you charge him? Did you investigate him?
Gentlemen, time has expired. The witness can respond, then we'll move on to our last.
I don't know, sir, whether or not you've ever had occasion to try to investigate crimes under the rules and regulations and under the Constitution that we're bound by. We can gather evidence in particularly lawful ways. Can't charge people because we might think
It's not just
something.
that
We
you
can
didn't
charge
you
people.
didn't investigate. You didn't
time.
investigate the Mueller team
Gentleman's
wiping their
time.
phones, and you
Gentleman's
won't tell
time.
us who gave the orders because you're protecting those people.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentlelady from Wyoming is recognized.
Mr. Durham,